And we're live!
Hello, creepy chums. Are we on? Anybody there? Guess what's playing? Oh, there is somebody there. Hold on.
No,
it's
no,
not.
it's here.
There's
here.
nobody. I was there. Okay. It's been so long since we did one.
I know. My gosh.
It's been 2 months.
It's Lawrence.
Flying by, everybody's getting goose pimples.
Fingers.
Thank you.
Yes.
Show us your pumpkins. Oh, Mrs. We've got some lovely pumpkins here. And here we go.
Here we go.
We'll let Carry On Screaming
Oh,
play.
Chris is here. Chris Stratton. Hello,
Hello,
Chris.
Hello, chims you put there, but I know what you mean. It's okay. Hello, creepy chums today. Oh, what a carry on.
We're in a different location.
Yes, we are in an amusement apartment at the moment. I'll tell you what, Jim, you could do with giving this a bit of a clean, can you? Look at the state of this place, look.
I know, I've
Terrible,
even got a
shocking,
few
isn't
bugs.
And all that. I never drink wine. Cheers.
No, you're on water.
Just water.
And you've got your Harry Potter cloak on. Or Bella Lugosi.
Yeah, Bela Lugosi. I bid you welcome. I love, as people who know me well know well, I love my old 1930s and 1940s Universal horror films, particularly Lon Chaney Jr. and Bela Lugosi. So there you go. Anyway, so we can talk about those later in a comedy context, of course, because they did meet Bud and Lou. But anyway, yeah, shall we start?
We'll start.
We've got a forum here, have we?
We first of all, just for those that are joining, we are in a different location. We're in amusement apartments, and we've had quite a busy couple of months.
Hence why we've been off air. Obviously, as you probably know, Gemma's a school teacher, frontline school teacher, so it's half term. So hence why we can do one of these live things.
And it's Halloween.
And it's Halloween, my favourite time of the year.
So the theme today, we thought we'd have a theme, and we keep it to horror, but comedy horror.
Comedy horror.
And this is the perfect day to do it because it is the anniversary of Charles Hawtrey.
It is. He died on this day in 1988. So he's got a very small part, Mrs. Got a very small part in Carry On Screaming, but he's brilliant as Dan, the laboratory man. And I say, although we've not been doing the films or the live films every day for a while now, if you follow Robert Ross, comedy historian on Facebook, and my Twitter page and my Instagram page, we do a daily comedy every day, which is an anniversary of a birth or a death or a sitcom starting or a film being released or a book being published or something like that. And also up until Halloween, the last 28 days, we've been doing a Halloween countdown of comedians in horror situations. And today's is Charles Hawtrey. So check out the Facebook, I think it's Carry On Screaming with Odd Bod lurking. On Instagram, it's when he did a 1976 Halloween special with Run Around, nah, with Mike Reed when he played a very camp Count Dracula. So there's a little screen grab on Instagram. And on Twitter, it's the Ghosts of St. Michael's, Will Hay and Claude Holbert, where, as you commented when we did one of our comedy horror double bills right at the very start of lockdown, it's basically Charles Hawtrey doing Carry On Harry Potter, isn't it, really?
He does. He looks like Harry Potter.
So,
now,
you know.
was he... Forgive me, I may have this wrong, but was he in Supergram where he played...
He was indeed in Supergram.
Dracula.
No, not Dracula. He was the Duke of Clarence.
Oh, what was he in? Didn't he play
Run
Dracula?
Run Around. I've been flogging myself doing my really bad Mike Reed impersonation. Run Around now. He's Dracula and Run Around now. But his very last screen appearance, or I think appearance of any sort, apart from Deal High Street being thrown out of the pub, was in Supergram in 1987. And there's some great guest stars in Supergram. Patrick Troughton was in it, and all sorts of people popped up in Supergram. But yeah, Charles Hawtrey was there. Brilliant, actually. And there have been certain books, I won't name what they are because you don't want to read them, but who say that he if he was in Supergram, he'd be incoherent. Well, he is in Supergram, and he's fantastic. A year before he died, so he still says that, oh, hello, on his first appearance, and he's really funny in it. And you can buy it. It's on network DVD, but get the whole set because they're all brilliant. I love Superman. Anyway,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, do feel free to throw some questions. Just to comment here.
Susie, hello Susie, my
Yeah.
darling. Oh, my sister's there as well. Look, we can continue now. But anyway, yes, you're right. I remember Kenneth Williams did a fresh cream cakes advert, no advertising, as Dracula in the early '80s. Yeah, he did lots of adverts. He got quite embarrassed because he got paid so much money for doing commercials. He did one for Pyramid Chocolates, I think, and it was Kenneth Williams and Leslie Phillips. Ding dong, you're not wrong. Did the voiceovers, which I've got somewhere. But yeah, he did loads of adverts and got paid a lot of money. The Toilet Blue, he did the blue voice for that as well. And got quite embarrassed about, this can't be for me, this check's ridiculous, we're doing a silly voiceover. But yes, he did lots of those. Anyway.
Chris Hannett's here, who we wished a happy birthday to
yes,
last week,
absolutely,
I think it was.
yes.
So
Fantastic.
21 again.
And indeed, aren't we all? And I think Chris is our fan of the month, isn't he, for the upcoming newsletter? Yes.
If you haven't subscribed, please visit robertross.co.uk, and we send out a monthly newsletter. We get it as close to the start of the month as we can, depending on
work commitments,
how busy we are.
Permitting, but yeah.
And you too could be a fan of the month. So
I mean, what's not to like? Come on, be honest. But yeah, so Charles Hawtrey was, he died today in 1988, and as I said before at the top of the mention of that, his little bit in Carry On Screaming. You probably know this, but I'll repeat it. It's from several of my books. But he wasn't going to be in it originally. The film, the Carry On prior to Carry On Screaming was Carry On Cowboy. And there's a brilliant, wildly bearded character actor called Sidney Bromley who always plays sort of slightly mad people. I think he's in Island of Terror, isn't he? And he's in American Werewolf in London. He's killed by the werewolf in that. He always plays sort of like crazy drunken tramps. He plays the rancher Sam Houston in Carry On Cowboy, and he was so good and impressed Gerald Thomas, the director, so much that Gerald Thomas offered him the role of Dan, the laboratory man, in Carry On Screaming, and there was no part for Charles Hawtrey. And there was one film critic, C.H.B. Williamson, who wrote, I think, for Film and Filming, some magazine, who heard that Charles Hawtrey wasn't going to be in the upcoming Carry On film, and wrote a small column saying what a shame because he's such a brilliant comedy actor, and will his lack in the cast affect the box office? And never one to sort of have his thunder usurped or taken by a journalist. The producer, Peter Rogers, quickly recast and dropped Sidney Bromley and gave Charles Hawtrey the part of Dan, which was about 2 days' work. And he's terrific in it. That scene with Peter Butterworth and Harry H. Corbett, things are definitely looking up that bit. Anyway, so we're celebrating Hawtrey today.
lovely. All right.
Like most days, really.
Well, Chris Hannett says, it's such a shame about the life of Charles Hawtrey, such a troubled soul, but great addition to the Carry On family all the same.
I think he's, absolutely, I won't go into his private turmoil, but in terms of, I always think, and I remember having a conversation with Jim Dow about this, because we both think he's the most photogenic of the Carry On actors. You watch him, and I can do it because I've got a camera here, and Gerald Thomas... When there was a two-shot, if you look at stuff like Carry On Again Doctor or Carry On Screaming, where Jim and Hawtrey have got some scenes together, Jim is looking at me like you're looking at me, thank you, as you should be, because you're having a conversation, because there shouldn't be a camera there. Whereas Hawtrey is pretty much like this, just looking just off camera, so you get full face of Charles Hawtrey. He was a bugger like that, but he got great close-ups, and those twinkling eyes behind those glasses are really sort of exciting. And his career goes back to working with obviously Will Hay and George Formby in the 1930s. So he had an amazing even before that on stage in the 1920s, and as a boy soprano on 78 RPM recordings. So he had an amazing career. But anyway, there we go. Yeah.
Okay, so Steve Mullin's here.
Steve Mullin, #1 fan, I think, really. Steve Mullin, isn't he? My gosh. Thank you, Steve. You support all we do. And
we love you.
We shall wear it always. Go on, anyway.
So he's, interesting question. He says, why is the mix of comedy and horror so great? Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is by far their best film. Carry On Screaming is fantastic. And Young Frankenstein, in his opinion, Mel Brooks is the best.
Yeah.
He says, your thoughts, Robert?
Well, thank you, Steve, for that. It is interesting. I love it as a sort of subgenre. I love the comedy horror, obviously. I I think to get psychological for a nanosecond, I think the reaction to comedy and horror, it's the only sort of genres of entertainment that there's actually a physical reaction. You know, you scream at horror and you laugh at comedy, and you don't say, you scream with laughter. So I think part of the brain is quite close. The reaction's quite close. You either recoil in horror or you laugh, don't you?
And I think comedy always breaks tension, which is true to life, isn't it? So although something scary's about to happen, and we often sit and watch a horror film, and I'm like, on you, and then you'll say something that'll make me laugh.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But there are always there's comedy relief in even straight horror films. Watching Legend of the Werewolf, for example, the Roy Castle's photographer who's dragged in to take photographs of corpses. That's a little cameo. Roy Hudd is in the Blood Beast Terror, another Peter Cushing film, as a sort of mortician. All morticians, or sort of people who deal with cadavers in horror films, they always eat a hearty meal when there's a dead body in front of them, because they've got very strong stomachs. And to reinforce that point, they always usually cast a comedy actor or comedian in that part. But yeah, so it's a fine line, and Young Frankenstein, of course, is brilliant, but the granddaddy of all, for me, the comedy horrors is Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein. And what that film did so brilliantly, because Bud and Lou's career wasn't teetering, but it wasn't as big as it was 5, 6, 7 years earlier. And the Universal monsters had been done to death in 1945, a film called House of Dracula, where Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman, Lawrence Talbot, had been cured of his curse. 3 years later, they dug all the monsters up, and beautifully they all played their original roles. Lon Chaney Jr. was the only actor to play the Wolfman at Universal through 4 straight horror films and the Bud and Lou movie. Glenn Strange was brought back as the Frankenstein's monster, who played it twice before in House of Dracula and House of Frankenstein. And Bela Lugosi came back to play Dracula for the very first time since 1930. So 18 years had gone by, and originally they would have cast John Carradine, and that would have been the sensible thought, because John Carradine had played Dracula the previous 2 films, House of Dracula and House of Frankenstein. But beautifully, they brought Bela Lugosi back. I've got to do that, haven't I? And he's absolutely brilliant in it. I mean, he's probably his last totally coherent, convincing and convicted performance. That he's so brilliant in it. But anyway, Lou Costello hated the script originally. It was called The Brain of Frankenstein, and he said, I won't swear, but he said some nasty things about it, and said his 5-year-old daughter could write something better. But it's probably their most popular film. Certainly at the time, it raised their stakes again, and hence why they did a load of Bud and Lou meet various monsters after that. But yeah, I love that film. Anyway.
There we go. Okay. Chris Stratton says his favourite comedy horror is What a Carve Up. Mine too. I love that film. Not sure why Adam Faith guest starred at the end.
Well, there hangs a tale. You see, I shall explain all. Rick Blackman, my dear friend Rick, his wife Christine, that's her favourite film of all time. What a Carve Up. I love it. But the producers and director team were trying unsuccessfully to do a sort of rival to the Carry-Ons, because we're talking about 1961, 62. So the Sid James, Kenneth Connor teaming in What a Carve Up, they were both at the time popular in the Carry-Ons. And at the same time, they were working on a film to go into pre-production called What a Whopper. Now, What a Whopper also stars Sid James as a sort of Scottish... He's a landlord in Scotland. He's not Scottish. He plays it like Sid James, but he's in Scotland with a Loch Ness Monster. That's the whole premise of it. And Adam Faith is the lead in that film. So that's why they were linking it from the end of that one into the What a Whopper. That was the idea. Gilbert Gunn directed What a Whopper. It's a good Sunday matinee film, What a Whopper. I love it. So that's why he's in it as a sort of gag appearance. Plus he was a big star at the time, obviously. Singer and fledgling actor. And I always think that was probably the film that should have been the Hancock's half-hour film. I think Kenneth Connor plays it very much like Tony Hancock. So the Hancock and Sid James dynamic is very much like, Kenneth Connor and Sid in What a Car Bob, I think. Sharing a bed together is very horror.
And
Lauren Hardy did that, of course.
can I share your favourite thing, which I think was
Well,
my favourite
I don't know, it
thing
depends
of
what
that
it is.
film?
What is it? Go on, what?
Something you always do when you watch that film, and I did it too. When we first watched it together, we had this conversation.
Yeah.
Sid James walks in with fish and chips,
Yeah.
and we all say, let's go and order ourselves some fish and chips.
Just chips for me now, but I'm a vegan. But for me, you can smell the vinegar in that scene. It's it's the sexiest fish and chips in film history. You can smell. You got the gherkins, of course. Yes, it makes you want to have a bag of chips.
Can't watch it without fish and chips.
I shall plug my local. There's a local takeaway that were working very beautifully throughout lockdown called the Codfather. See what they did there? I like a pun. The Codfather, and they did some great chips, didn't they? Oh my god! So when we watched What a Cover, because we did What a Cover, it was one of the comedy horror watchathons, didn't we? Did we do that?
No, I don't think we did.
Did we never do that one?
I don't know.
I forget which ones we did because they got a bit wearing because I was trying to watch the film and trying to tweet at the same time, which is a bit distracting. But no, I love that film. And again, like Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and like a lot of brilliant comedy horror films, the comedians are teamed with proper horror people. So if you look at What a Carve Up, you've got Donald Pleasance in there, who was years before he was in the Halloween films and all that, but he was around that time. He played Dr. Crippen on screen, and he'd been in The Flesh and the Fiends, about the Burke and Hare, murder mysteries, and body snatchers. Deathline was to come in the mid 70s, but by that time. But also Michael Gough, who plays the butler come sort of housekeeper with his cigarette, reading Lady Chatterley's Lover, and he'd obviously been in lots of horror films. He did Hammer, he did the Dracula with Hammer with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. He just made a film which I love. It's so bad it's great, called Congo, which is a sort of a giant ape film with Jess Conrad, my good pal Jess Conrad. So he was well known as a horror actor as well. So you've got proper horror people in the comedy situation. Dennis Price had done loads of sort of horror films and would go on to do lots of stuff at Hammer. So the casting around the comedians is authentic, and that's the thing I love about a good comedy horror.
Well, there we go. And Steve Mullins says we did do it, so there we go.
We did do it, yeah, I thought we did, but
I must have been when we watched it.
It was early, but I was probably with my mouth full of chips and also trying to tweet at the same time. But anyway, there we go.
Anyway, message here from Barnaby and Jones
Barnaby,
of
my
Spiteful
producer.
Puppet.
Hooray! Oh, we should buy it. There's a really good CD out. I'm not going. What's
called
Barnaby's
Jeepers Creepers, very in line with the
Indeed.
theme
Yes.
of tonight.
I'm sure we'll get to Young Frankenstein. Through the eyes of Martin Feldman, Barnaby has been brilliantly produced and directed from my old West End play from 2016, which Terry Jones, my dear late pal, directed for the stage, and it's now available via Spiteful Puppet, only, I think, exclusively via Spiteful Puppet, as a download and as a CD. So, yes. We'll talk about Martin Feldman later, I'm sure, but anyway, yeah.
So Barnaby's question is, happy nearly Halloween. So a question, Bloodbath at the House of Death, the Kenny Everett movie, your views on it, horribly brilliant or brilliant horrible?
Brilliantly horrible. I can't say horrible, it's my speech, but I like it. I mean, I do like it a lot. Again, that's another one where they bring in another horror legend to play opposite the comedians. It's Kenny Everett and Pamela Stevenson are the stars of it. Kenny Everett's only feature film appearance, and playing Mr. Sinister, I think that's his character's name. Mr. Sinister is Vincent Price. Brilliant. I mean, brilliant in it. I mean, and Vincent Price, it was filmed in England. It's a brilliant cast, actually. Graham Stark's in it. Gareth Hunt is in it. Anyway, loads of good character actors. Written by Mike McIntyre's dad, Ray Cameron, and Barry Cryer, my old mate Baz. Hey, thank you. Yes, we've got to mention Baz. And Vincent had done a programme with Baz, I think in the 70s. It maybe a not Morecambe Wise. Maybe a Tommy Cooper. I think he'd been on a Tommy Cooper for Yorkshire TV. He'd certainly worked when Barry was part of the writers' room on a show in the 70s. Back when Baz was hosting Joker's Wild and had dark hair and would smoke all the time. He now has white hair and smokes all the time. But 10, 12 years had gone by between this 1970s telly that Vincent Price had done with Barry Cryer and Bloodbath at the House of Death. And Vincent saw him and said, "My God, Baz, you've gone white in the name of comedy," which I love. But no, it's an odd film. I have got a copy. Have you ever seen that? Bloodbath at the House of Death?
I'd like to see it.
I've got it on VHS. I have to get the old steam-driven VHS recorder out. I've got a very soft spot for it, but it's very much a Robert Ross sort of film. It's a fun comedy horror. Yes. What am I saying? Of course, it's brilliant. It's horribly brilliant, is what it is. Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, just a quick shout out. Christine Blackman is here.
Oh, brilliant! Well, did you get your reference earlier? Yes. What Carve-Up is your favourite film? Right? Many a happy time around your and Rick's house after a gallon of your gorgeous home brew, and we tend to sit down and watch What a Carve-Up, and me and Rick are asleep after about 30 seconds usually. We've seen it. Chris can chant along to every line of dialogue pretty much.
Oh, brilliant.
Dennis Price is like, oh god, yeah. What about Guy? Who's got Guy's gun? Anyway, all that. Moving on.
Guy always did drink too much.
What a way to go.
Anyway.
Yes,
Your sister, Fiona,
who also loves that film.
Says, what is your favourite horror comedy film?
Oh my gosh. I love a comedy horror film. I love all the Bud and Lou films, particularly Frankenstein. I love Young Frankenstein. I think really my comfort blanket one, because it was so long before I saw it again, having seen it as a kid on telly, is the Frankie Howerd House in Nightmare Park, which we've talked at great length about. I did a little film about that, didn't we? And I think we definitely watched that as part of our double bills. And again, they've got a proper horror actor to play against the comedian. You've got Ray Milland comes in, who'd just done a couple of very low budget horror films. One called oh god, what's it called? The Thing with Two Heads, where he's a white supremacist sort of bigot whose head is severed and then replaced on the shoulders of a black man. So you've got him with a black actor. It's very funny, but not intentionally funny. It's very funny. He just done that. He also just done a great film called Frogs, which did for frogs what Hitchcock had done for the birds. They basically killer frogs. So he was well known for sort of horror films at that time, and when he was brought into the Frankie Howerd film. And he'd also made a brilliant 1940s, if you love sort of atmospheric ghost films, did a film in 1944 called The Uninvited, which is set in Cornwall, but sort of Hollywood Cornwall, and it's got Rebecca feel to it. It's got that sort of atmospheric sort of thriller feel to it. It's really good, and no spoilers. But at a time in the 1940s when the ghost was usually a bloke in a blanket, or some a la sort of Scooby-Doo 20 years later, sort of like some crook trying to scare people away from a house where the treasure's been hidden or something. In The Uninvited, there's a proper ghost in it. And I'm getting quite good. It's really goosebumpy. So Ray Milland brings that sort of credibility to House in Nightmare Park. It's the one I always called as a kid. It's the one with the snakes in it. So that's probably my favourite comedy horror. So
go on, there you go.
Get your pump.
Have a pumpkin.
Thank you very much. It's the best of rap adult night. Go on, anyway.
Right, okay.
So
Gavin says hello to both of us. He says, have you seen the horror spoof Frankula that David Barry was in, with Caroline Munro, Judy Matheson, Emma Dark, and also includes Vanilla Fielding providing a voiceover?
Well, of course I have. What are you talking about? No, that's from our good friends at Misty Moon, and David Barry, Merrick Jones, as I know him, actor and writer and director, resurrected his Frankie Abbott from Please Sir and the Fen Street Gang. There's a few. There's one with an Easter Bunny as well, which is quite fun. But yeah, they're all on YouTube, I think. But if you Google Misty Moon and Frankie Abbott, you'll find them. But yeah, I have. And Vera Day's in the one. My good friend Vera Day, who did loads of horror films, worked with Boris Karloff in a thing called The Grip of the Strangler, and did Quantum Mass 2 for Hammer. She's in the Bunny one, I think. She's certainly in one anyway. So yeah, I have seen those. That's a treat yet to come.
Okay.
They're glorious little short films that David loved doing. Yeah.
Okay. All right then. Dean Barker says, "What's the story behind Alexandra Dane working on Carry On Screaming? Did she do a scene and end up on the cutting room floor?"
Well, she's not in it. As far as I know, now I've not looked at the paperwork for a long time, but you know when the basic premise that Torvald Rothwell did for Carry On Screaming, there's lots of elements. Obviously, the Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson thing with Harry H and Peter Butterworth and all that going on. But the basic idea, now it's a film we're going to watch at your brother's actually over Halloween, House of Wax. The original House of Wax that Vincent Price did, that had been a film called The Mystery of the Wax Museum with Lionel Atwill and Fay Wray. And the basic premise of that film and House of Wax is that this mad owner of a wax museum, or waxworks, basically puts wax over dead bodies to make them look, they look really convincing because there's basically a dead body under there, and he just bungs wax over it and moulds it into shape over the skull, right? So that's really what Carry On Screaming's about. So all those when they're doing the waxworks in Frank Thornton's shop, and it's Joan Sims and it's Angela Douglas and all that throughout the film, there were lots of different plaster casts being done. There's some sort of half done, waiting to be frying tonight, waiting to be dropped into the vat. And I think Alexandra Dane, as far as I know, was the model for one of those.
Right.
So she had all the stuff put over herself, and then her. So she's there in sort of, waxen image only, but she's in there. So I give her a credit for because Joan Sims told me it was horrible how because she's got one right at the end when she winks at the end of the film, right? She had to be covered in all this sort of hot, quite hot, not boiling hot, but quite hot sort of stuff, papier-mâché or plaster of Paris or something, to get her little wax work done. Because they were proper waxworks. They weren't them sort of keeping very still. They're proper things because they bang them on their head and stuff, right? So they did all that for real. So Alexander Dane did one of those.
There we go.
Come on.
Right, for this next question, we're going to play a game.
Oh gosh, shall we? Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
First thing that comes into your head. Okay.
Well, we're live, right? I'm really careful. Okay. It's always sex and alcohol. Go on, what?
Okay. Spiders or snakes?
What? Feared of? Snakes.
Okay. Pumpkin or soup?
Soup.
Okay. Addams Family or Monsters?
Oh, Monsters.
There you go. That was the question.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the Addams Family of Monsters. Yeah, because it's coarser. It's a bit low rent for Monsters, and John Carradine's in a couple.
Okay. All right then. Alan G. Parker's here.
Alan, my dear friend, how are you? We must speak soon, my darling.
Okay, so he says, I don't know why, having seen it, but I just remembered the Ringo Starr and Harry Nilsson, Son of Dracula,
yeah.
And the soundtrack album is always in NYC secondhand shops.
Is it? Oh, I've got one of those, the gatefold. I'm wearing the cape if you've only joined the show, Al, recently. So Harry Nilsson is Dracula, or Son of Dracula, and you can open it up, and it's like a sort of cloak opens. The film, Ringo Starr plays Merlin in it. And there's another one you got. Dennis Price is in that as well. He did loads of quite corny horror films towards the end of his life. One brilliant one, Theatre of Blood, but lots of corny ones like Horror of Frankenstein, and Frankenstein versus Dracula, and Vampire Lesbos, which is a personal favourite of mine. He did quite a lot of quite cheap horror films. He's in Son of Dracula. And the soundtrack album, I didn't know it was quite common parlance in New York. I bought one years and years ago, 25 years ago. And one track, there's another Beatle on there, because I think, Al will know this, but George Harrison, I think, plays like cowbell or something on it. So there's like one like dong of a bell, and George Harrison did that just because it was 1973, and why not? Ringo called some pals in. So yes, thank you. Good. Oh my God. I think Alan G wins the question for the most obscure film mentioned so far. I'm sure few people have seen that Son of Dracula, not the Lon Chaney Jr. 1940s one, 1973 Son of Dracula. Yeah.
Right, a left-wing comment or question, I should say, but in the spirit of comedy. People would like to know what's happening with Forgotten Heroes, a comedy, which
don't read that out. I'm working on it now. I've taken an hour off to do this. No, seriously. It's a huge. No, Jem, back me up. Right?
I know.
It's huge, isn't it? It's huge. It's all sorted. It's all been edited and done. The Unbound guys have done their thing. I'm just going through it now and answering questions and checking facts and making all beautiful and getting all the photographs together, which is also my responsibility. If you have subscribed or pledged for the book, it's coming. It will be next year. It's going to be massive. It's going to be mahoosive.
Yeah.
Because I was a bit concerned. Cause I, as always, overwrote. I wrote too much, and I thought, they'll cut some people out. They haven't, thankfully. So in fact, they've asked me to add somebody.
This is why we've not been live on air. To be truthful, isn't it?
I have been square-eyed. I've literally,
We're having a break.
Busy times. Yeah, this is your half term. I'm on a break, but if anybody from Unbound is watching, it's coming. I promise you. I've almost done it. But yes, so it's going to be quite the book. I think you're getting a bargain. I know you've waited like 15 years for it. But it is going to be pretty fun. My one regret on a somber note is that Terry Jones didn't live to see it happen. But he knew it was happening. That's the most important thing. But it was Terry's idea.
Right, back to Halloween. Okay, Chris Stratton can't remember the film title, but there was a British horror in the 70s where two of the Doctor in the House cart. One was Robin Nedwell, played two medical students.
Yeah.
A bit of a comic theme there.
Yeah. Is Al Cole's one? He's not, is he? It was the Vault of Horror. One of the I've got from when Anchor Bay used to put out lovely box sets. An American company, Anchor Bay. So never get rid of your all-region DVD player. Back in the 90s, they did about 5 or 6 little coffins. I don't know if you got these. Of about 4 or 5 films in each coffin. There was a Tygon, there was a Tyburn, I think. There was a Pete Walker collection. Norman J. Warren collection, brilliant 1970s British horror filmmaker. And an Amicus collection. Now, the Vault of Horror is one of the Amicus, they're called portmanteau films. They're basically 4 or 5 short films with a framing device around it. And Robin Nedwell and Jeffrey Davis, who were indeed in not Doctor in the House, they were doing Doctor in Charge then, I think, 73. Just before they did Doctor at Sea in 74. They're in one of these. With Arthur Mullard, I think, is the gravedigger. And it's Michael Craig, I think, is the guy that's like buried alive. Am I getting thumbs up for that? I think it's Michael Craig. Is the guy that gets buried alive for some sort of convoluted reason. But yeah, that's that. So it's one of the portmanteau from Amicus, which we've been watching a couple just recently.
Amicus or Hammer?
Amicus. Oh, you mean definitely Amicus, that film? Are you
No,
asking me
no,
whether
your
like Soup
favourite.
or Pumpkin? I
don't know why Soup or
Oh God, you can't Soup or Pumpkin. You can't ask me that question because I love them both. Although I do my favourite Amicus. You prefer Amicus, don't you? I'm going to watch a Hammer tonight for the first time. Probably Dracula, the original Dracula.
Amicus.
Horror of Dracula in America. But we watched The House That Bled to Death just recently, which is probably my favourite.
Last week, actually.
Last week, my favourite portmanteau, Amicus, with John Pertwee. Talking about with the cloak. John Pertwee just having started doing Doctor Who on telly as a brilliant actor, and it's one of my favourite bits in any film where John Pertwee, as only John Pertwee can, is playing a very arrogant film star who's making a cheap horror film. In a cheap horror film, right? That's why I love it so much. And he's got this awful set and he's got this cane and he's poking and he says, look, you can blow peas for it. Look, not like the great ones. Frankenstein, the Phantom of the Opera, Dracula, the one with Bela Lugosi, not this new fella. And we've just watched Christopher Lee in a short story like 2 minutes earlier, so that he was the new fella. I love all that meta stuff going on. So yeah, so that's it. Anyway, Vault of Horror is the one with Robin Nedwell and Jeffrey Davis.
Okay. Oh, hang on. I'm losing the questions.
That's all right. I can get some water.
Okay, so Susie Dawkins. Hello, Susie.
Hello, Susie. It's definitely water, I promise.
She's...
Hope you're well, darling. We're still waiting. If you want any help with the Sabrina book,
what were we watching? And Sabrina was mentioned the other day.
Heidi High.
Heidi High. There was a mention of Sabrina, and we thought of you.
I was going to message you. I'll get the episode unless you know it already. But I think it's the last season that Simon Cadell did. And they're talking about guest stars, and they've got Charlie Drake coming up. And last week we had Sabrina, so we must email Susie and tell her the episode for like an appendix in your book. Anyway, I will definitely check which one it was. I think it was the penultimate one that Simon Cadell did. Anyway,
I love this question, Susie. This is so you. She says she's just wondering what happened to Fenella Fielding's dress from Carry On Screaming. So iconic, it should be in a museum somewhere.
I agree, or in my collection in Comedy Cottage. Well, not in Comedy Cottage if you're late to the party, by the way. I don't know who. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that was made for that film because a lot of stuff was from off the peg in Carry On and sort of had a bit taken out the back and altered and whatever. I know Fenella had her ring for a long time. My very good the ring she wears in the movie. My good friend, thank you. Yeah, I know. I've got to clarify this about Carry On, haven't we? But my good friend Simon McKay, who was sort of Fenella's friend and sort of cohort at personal appearances for the last sort of 4 or 5 years of her life, will probably know exactly where that dress is. But I love it too. I mean, isn't it beautiful? I mean, she slinks in there. Do you mind if I smoke? It's one of the most iconic comedy performances, film performances, I think. And the fact she only did one prior Carry On, and she's so indelibly linked with the Carry On.
She is the ultimate vamp.
Absolutely, but because of that part, because her little bit in Carry On Regardless is lovely with Kenneth Connor, Penny panting, you know, it's the way I always breathe, that stuff. But her performance in, I know this stuff too well. Her performance in Carry On Screaming is just perfect. It's perfect. I love her in that film. Yeah, God bless her. We miss her on the circuit, on the comedy circuit, Fenella. She was always good.
I remember her telling me, she said it was very difficult to sit in when I met her. She said
she's basically sewn into it. That's why. I mean, she's the I did a TV called Funny Business years ago, one of my first tellies, with a great comedian Jojo Smith, and she was interviewing me and Fenella and Jack Douglas in a deserted cinema, I think, somewhere, and she's basically said you have impossibly fantastic bosoms, and Fenella said, but they're real, darling, they're real, and they were, but that dress did them wonders. She also, if you're a fan of comedy horror, and that's why you're here, obviously, she did a film 3 or 4 years earlier for Hammer Films called The Old Dark House, with Robert Morley and Jeanette Scott. Joyce Grenfell, and she's equally good in that. It's a nutty film. Nothing much to do with the 1932 Boris Karloff film, but a good film. William Castle directed it, or produced it rather. Who loved sort of gimmicks in films. He produced The Tingler, the Vincent Price film, where you sat in a packed cinema. And every time it's like a slivery little sort of slug thing that crawls along the screen, and one of the chairs in the cinema was wired up to like a mild electric shock. So you might go, oh God! So the Tingler's got you. William Castle was the gimmick king, and he produced the Hammer Old Dark House with Fenella Fielding. Anyway.
Okay, right. John Hewitt is here.
John, hello. This is lovely. It's like this is your life. I'm not seeing you guys for so long. Oh, okay.
So going back to Dennis Price,
yes.
He says. Have you seen Horror of It All, Chums? Long overdue a release.
Oh, Horror of It All?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
I'm probably Chums as
No, he's the one, yeah, you can see it's part of the catchphrase now. I must say, John, is John on tour? He's doing some shows, the Fangs, one bloody Fang after another. And we love a pun in this show, where John is doing a sort of a wonderful sort of pastiche of Dracula. Very John, like me, is obsessed with the carry-ons and that sort of tradition of British comedy. So there's lots of puns and blue jokes in it, I'm sure. I must come and see it when you're back on tour. If you're not on tour, I'm sure you are actually. If you're socially distanced. Yeah, I mentioned before that Dennis did loads of horror films around that time. When I was working for ITV, I was trying to get a Dennis Price box set together, and he's one of those actors that even then, we're talking about maybe 10 years ago, my producers at ITV were sort of balking a bit because he didn't have the cachet of, I did some stuff on John Mills, and I did a Donald Sinden box set, Margaret Lockwood we did, Laurence Olivier, we did loads of these box sets, basically plundering what ITV had, which was the Rank collection. Kenneth Moore, Stuart Granger, I did about 15 of these things, and Dennis Price was on my list to do because we had loads of Dennis Price films, including some of his horror things. That's Your Funeral, he's in that, for example. Hammer comedy, but they didn't go for it. But I've got a big collection now. If my pal Al's on here, Alan Coles and Jo Hasseltine, if she sees this, for Dennis Price's centenary, which was 2015. We went on a glorious pub crawl because he liked a drink, did Dennis. And we know all those horror films. So yeah. So as I mentioned before, there's lots of sort of obscure ones. The Earth Dies Screaming. He's in that. There's lots of them. The ones I mentioned, Frankenstein versus Dracula, which I like. Horror of Frankenstein. Theatre of Blood was his very last film. Now Theatre of Blood, where it's Vincent Price and the late great Diana Rigg. Without spoilers, if you haven't seen it, you must see it. Vincent Price, a great Anglophile. He made quite a few films in this country, which won the General, Matthew Hopkins film, directed by Michael Reeves, Dr. Phibes. All those sort of films were very popular in Britain. Theatre of Blood has got the greatest cast of any horror film, and it's a comedy horror film because you've got all these wonderful character actors. The basic premise is that Vincent Price is Edward Lionheart, this wonderful Shakespearean actor, quite hammy Shakespearean actor, who disappears, supposedly dead, but then reappears to kill all the theatre critics that gave him bad notices. And actors being actors who hate theatre critics, of course, at the best of times, all the theatre critics, people were leaping at the chance to play these terrible theatre critics. So Dennis Price plays one, Arthur Lowe is in it, Robert Morley, Jack Hawkins is his last film as well. There's Michael Hordern is the first one, and all the League of Gentlemen guys love it. We can quote it. Me and Mark Gatiss can quote great reams of that script. Anyway, so Dennis is in that, and he's brilliant. He's basically dragged on the back of a horse. It's not really him. That's not what killed him, but it's his last film. Anyway, there you go.
Okay, right. So, I'm just going to rephrase this question. Lawrence asks, I think he means something to do with Kenneth Williams in The Send-Up Hound of the Baskervilles with Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. What can you tell us about that? Or
I can tell you a lot about that. How long you got? Okay, so 1977, Paul Morrissey, who was part of the Andy Warhol gang in New York, abstract pop art film director, made a film called Flesh for Frankenstein in the early 70s. He was a massive Carry On fan, this guy, Paul Morrissey. And he got to direct this spoof of The Hound of the Baskervilles. Peter Cook as Sherlock Holmes, Dudley Moore as Dr. Watson, dream casting. I was actually talking to my friend Alan Coles about this the other day because the poster, I've got the quad poster. I'm sure John's got the poster too, John Hewer, because he's a fellow original poster fanatic. And the caricatures of all the actors around it are spot on, and the cast is incredible. Terry Thomas is in it, Irony Handel, Max Wall, Roy Kinnear, Joan Greenwood, Spike Milligan is the Baskerville police force, and Kenneth Williams is Sir Henry Baskerville. The part, I know, right? Yeah, you're laughing already. Denham Elliott's in it, but Kenneth is outrageous. He's the if you've seen the Hammer version, which we watched again a week or two ago.
yes.
I have been working, I promise, but I have a night off sometimes to watch a film. He plays the Christopher Lee part in the spoof, right? Yeah, I know, right? I know. He's great. And what it is, because a lot of the dialogue is pinched from around the horn, so there's lots of the bonus stuff, the Julian and Sandy stuff, and he's very camp in it. He's very limp-wristed in it, Kenneth Williams. And the original idea that Paul Morrissey wanted, he was a carry-on nut, as I mentioned, he wanted Charles Hawtrey to play it. We're going back to the start of the show. Charles Hawtrey was originally cast to be in this thing. And if you know your carry-ons, by 1977, Charles Hawtrey was well out of the carry-ons and was not really fit for work, to be fair. So he wasn't available or didn't want to do it, or one of the two. He said no, basically, or he wasn't in it. So laterally thinking, they thought, well, we can't get Charles Hawtrey, we'll get Kenneth Williams. And Kenneth said yes. And when we will resurrect these with the next girlfriend of mine, and Alan and Henry, we would do a thing called the Hammer Horror Pub Crawl, or the Hammer Crawl, mainly through Bray. Now, they shot it at Bray Studios, the home of the Hammers. And there's a pub there called the Royal Oak, where if you read Kenneth Williams' diaries, you'll see that on one particular day when they were trying to get some stuff, there's a scene with the dog that's, spoilers alert here, but it turns out to be quite a nice, friendly dog, the Hound of the Baskervilles. Big old wolfhound that's licking Kenneth's face. And he didn't really want to do this scene. But Peter Cook took him to this pub to have a few pink gins and give him the courage to do this scene, and he gets quite annoyed in his diary, saying, I was tricked into doing this scene. But it's an odd film. It's a fun film. I really do like it a lot, but it's a bit like Bloodbath at the House of Death. you've got to enjoy comedy horrors, but for the cast alone, and if you buy the DVD, I forget who did. I think Laserlight might have put it out. There's 2 different versions. There's a longer sort of director's cut. So if you don't like it, you can don't like it twice. Anyway. But,
okay.
Yeah.
All right then. So another question here from Gavin. He says, "What do you think of the Young Ones episode Nasty, which the Damned performed a song especially written for the show, and the Bottom episode where Richie and Eddie go trick or treating?"
Well, if you know me well again, you know I adore Rick Mayo and all those guys. But yes, of course. So the Bottom episode is brilliant, of course, because every episode of Bottom is fantastic, and we must do that at some point. A rewatch. Well, for me, and a watch. You've not watched them, have you? Bottom,
no.
Or Young Ones, okay. The main reason I love the Young Ones, the Damned, yes, of course, and the Young Ones, again, not many people say this, and there's a book here, I want to do a book about Rick anyway, but there's a book in terms of comedy horror, and the Young Ones, because no one seems to say that, basically the Young Ones did what the Goon Show were doing in the 50s, they were a very anarchic, crazy comedy, but they would stop for a performance by a contemporary band, as where the Goons had Ray Ellington and his quartet doing sort of jazzed up versions of nursery rhymes and popular songs of the day. You know, the Young Ones had proper rock stars and pop stars come in to do a song in the Young One house, in the Young One flat, which I think is a genius idea. And the great thing about Nasty, of course, is Terry Jones is in it as the priest, and there's a sort of scene when they're around a sort of open coffin. And Terry's the vicar, very drunken performance, not meant to be, in the script. It wasn't Terry after a few bottles of Pitbull. But there's a lovely sort of passing the baton about that. The fact that they were fans of Monty Python, and Terry's in that episode. And it's almost like where John Cleese did the ITV Tales of Men's Shirts for the Goons. He was doing the announcer part in the late 60s with Seacombe and Spike and Peter Sellers. So it's like a sort of relay race of anarchic comedy, and that's Terry saying to the Young Ones, "Yeah, son, it's your turn now. You go ahead and do that." I love it. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, right. Gosh, we got a lot of questions here.
Well,
we got about 15.
We'll do a part
minutes,
2 or
but
something.
We'll keep going.
We'll do a part 2.
Right, this is a long one, so allow me to read. Okay, so
There's no answer to that.
John Burr. Gosh, you've given me a lot here. He says, "Robert, do you remember seeing The Hammer at the Barbican in about 96 and seeing Curse of the Werewolf, Phantom of the Opera on the big screen? Herbert Lom was in the audience with us as the Phantom in his bomber jacket.
That's right.
I remember having a brief chat with you in the lobby, and importantly, the audiences were laughing throughout the Curse of the Werewolf. Hammer always has a wonderful comic integrity. Do you think this has been magnified with the passing of time?"
Gosh, I forgot you were there, John, but that was great, because the year before that they did the Carry On season. Every Carry On apart from That's Carry On, including Columbus. And I think that's right. Was that the order? Was Carry On first, then Hammer? Or maybe it's the other way around? I think Hammer was next, second. 96, we're talking about? 95, 96? Yes, yeah, absolutely. The main reason, they weren't laughing at the Phantom of the Opera, were they? Because Herbert Lom, who indeed was there, who was in a few Hammer films, and he was in Asylum, we watched just a little while ago, a couple of days ago, and Dash Dash, and now the Screaming Starts, exclamation mark. He's in that, which you got freaked out about. You fell
asleep.
I fell asleep. I've seen it a million times. I had a glass of wine. But those two are in the Amicus coffin I was talking about earlier. Herbert Lom was there, and he was brilliant in the Phantom of the Opera. And originally they cast Cary Grant to play that part, and he turned it down. Eventually, I think he was in it. He was attached to it for quite a long time. And obviously, most of it he's got a mask on, and that's your favourite, isn't it? The musical Phantom of the Opera.
And the story. And
it's a beautiful, it's a love story, really. I mean, the Lon Chaney version of 1923, 24 is a love story, basically. But yeah, I think the reason they were laughing at The Curse of the Werewolf, there's a couple of sort of comedy cameos in there. Michael Ripper's particularly sort of wide-eyed and crazy. Lionel Jeffries is in it, isn't he? Peter Sallis is certainly in it. So there's some nice comedy performances in there. But the main reason is because Oliver Reed is in it at the age of 21, 22, star-making film, really. He did quite a lot of work for Hammer before that, little bits and coughs and spits. But there's quite a lot of drinking alcohol in it. So when he's not the Wolfman or when he's not the werewolf, he's just glugging red wine a lot, and that's funny because it's Oliver Reed doing it, and he was still alive at this point. So we're talking 96.
Yeah.
So he would turn up on, you know, I don't know, Aspel and Co or something, a bit Three Sheets to the Wind, or pretend to be Three Sheets to the Wind, and being Oliver Reed. So that's why I think people laugh at it now, because it's Oliver Reed playing a drunk, which is quite funny. But anyway, but it's a really good film. I love Curse of the Werewolf. A really quite gruesome, visceral horror film, but with, as you say, with comedy elements in it. Yeah.
Okay. Robert J. Simpson's here.
Hooray!
Hope you're doing all right over in Ireland.
Yeah,
Robert,
oh gosh, yes, no, absolutely. We're feeling your pain over here, dear boy. But anyway, yeah.
He says, with comedy horror, do you prefer your hybrids to edge towards the comedy or the horror aspect?
Good question.
Are there any modern comedy horrors you enjoy? And there's been a little bit of chat backwards and forwards just between some of the people about Shaun of the Dead.
Oh yeah, well, absolutely. Web Good Right's a good mate of mine. Bless you if you're watching it. Go, yeah, but Shaun of the Dead is brilliant, of course. Yeah, I mean, but all the League of Gentlemen, Reese is in that, and the League of Gentlemen, and what Reese and Steve have done with Number 9 and all that. I mean, that is comedy horror, mainly horror. To answer Robert's question, I love my comedy horror to veer towards horror. Actually, I think the best ones are. I think Young Frankenstein is quite scary in parts. I think Bud and Lou Meet Frankenstein, by its very nature, by the fact they're casting the original horror actors in their original parts. Lon Chaney Jr. went on record in the early 70s, just before he died, saying that Abbott and Costello had ruined the horror film, killed the horror film by sending it up. I disagree with him. As much as I respect and love Lon Chaney, one of my favourite actors, Lon Chaney Jr., I think they treat them with respect, particularly in the first one. They don't send the monsters up at all. If you watch those performances, Lon Chaney Jr. plays it dead straight. Bela Lugosi plays it even straighter than he did in Dracula, in my opinion. I think he's probably his better performance as Dracula in Bud and Lou Meet Frankenstein. So I like it when the horror is given the respect it deserves, because that makes the jokes all the funnier. We're not mentioning Bob Hope yet. We've got to mention Bob Hope. If you put Bob Hope into a haunted house, that's really funny. But the scares have got to be genuinely scary. You know, something like The Cat and the Canary or The Ghost Breakers. They're genuinely scary films. But Bob Hope is all the funnier by trying to send it up. He's a coward, but he's trying to send it up. But yeah, and the modern ones. There's lots. Yeah, I love. I mean, Fanged Up. There was produced by Jonathan Sofcott recently with Dapper Laughs in it. That was interesting. Lesbian vampire. Was it Lesbian Vampire Cleaners? What's that one? The one with James Corden and Matthew Horn.
Yes. Yeah.
Again, you get Paul McGann in that playing a very straight, playing the sort of memorial Peter Cushing character. You know.
And there was another one we watched very recently. It wasn't supposed to be a comedy.
Which was that?
The Drone.
Oh wow! Do you want to talk about The Drone? If you've got Netflix and you've got 75 minutes to kill, The Drone.
And you want to laugh?
Oh.
Watch The Drone. I can't believe let's not give this film any time.
I think the drone is purposely sending that whole thing up. But basically the plot line of this thing is like some sort of serial killer rapist guy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who's been cornered by the police. An American film, this cornered by the cops, and he wills his consciousness into one of those drones.
Like in Asylum.
Like with Herbert Lom. And
There
the little
we
killer
go.
Herbert Lom with the scalpel. So you can't see it. There you go. And I said I got a sign for. I met Herbert Lom. This was not when John Burr was at the Barbican. This was at some charity lunch. But Herbert Lom was there probably for a Peter Sellers thing or something. And I had this original still of Herbert Lom with, if you've seen Asylum, with his little Herbert Lom doll. And I got him to sign it, and he looked. He said, "Where the hell did you get this? That film was terrible. Great fun, but terrible." But anyway, I disagree. Roy Ward Baker, who directed it, and I also met him a few times. He made some great horror films like Quatermass and the Pit. He also made a film I really love, which most people don't love, called The Monster Club, which is another sort of one of those portmanteau films. And the thread of that, the plot line of that, is Vincent Price playing a sort of a down-and-out vampire who takes John Carradine, who's playing a horror writer, to lunch at the Monster Club. and there's little stories in between. But yeah, but Roy Wall Baker was visibly upset that I liked that film so much, and he directed it. You know, I was being nice about a film he'd made, but he was unsure of my sanity for liking it so much. But anyway, there we go.
There we go.
There we go.
Right, we got under 10 minutes. Let's see if
Okay.
we can whiz through a few
It's
more
all right.
questions.
Oh, that's okay. I'm enjoying this.
It's your favourite theme. Jonathan Sloman says there's a surprisingly spooky episode of The Goodies, the one about witchcraft.
Yes, Patricia Hayes is the guest star. Yeah, that's a good one. That's the episode. And we must, if you follow Daily Comedy, we will be definitely doing 50 years of The Goodies, November the 8th. That's 50 years of The Goodies to the day since the Tower of London episode went out. Yeah, the witchcraft one. That's got my favourite Goodies song in it, and it's so good they released it on the album. The Goodies sing songs from the Goodies, and it's Stuff That Gibbon, which seriously, William Edgar Oddie, songwriter extraordinaire, Bill
That's
Oddie,
terrible.
Stuff That Gibbon. It's I'll play it to you when we get home. So that's in that episode. It's a very funny episode. Yeah, the witchcraft one. I love that. There's also another one called Celia, which I think is in series 1, where there's a sort of a crazy Tim. Tim being Tim, he dresses up as a sort of female housekeeper because try and keep Tim out of a dress back in the day, you just couldn't do it. He did love to put drag on, did Timbo, and he's like the sort of housekeeper to this crazy sort of homicidal child in Celia. So there's a couple of horror ones in the oeuvre of the Goodies. Yeah.
Right, a myth-busting question now.
Okay, it's easy for you to say myth busting. not with a list.
I've got no water left.
No, I do want some water on.
Oh,
I'm gonna open the
I
wine
don't think
in a
there's any.
do you want a little bit of my glass? Look,
There
'cause
we go.
We're in the same bubble, so it's COVID friendly here. There we
Okay.
Go on.
Dean Barcross, is there any truth in Deborah Kerr being considered for Valeria in Carry On Screaming, or is it a
Oh
Carry
God,
On
I hope
myth?
so. Where have you heard that? I've never heard that in my entire puff. Deborah Kerr or Carr? No,
Kerr?
Let's score the whole thing off. Deborah Carr. What? Deborah Carr is in From the Innocents and From Here to Eternity. Deborah Carr. I have never heard that in my life, but I'd like to think it's true. I know they certainly offered the bung 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 originally to Sid James, who couldn't do it because he was he poorly? No, he hadn't had his heart attack at that point. Had he? He was busy doing George and the Dragon, I think, and couldn't do it. And when Sid couldn't do it, that's why it's called Sydney Bung, because it was going to be Sidney James playing it. And it's not a particularly Sid part, to be fair, but I can see Sid playing it. But lateral thinking again, when Sid was unavailable, they offered it to Tony Hancock, which would have made a lot of sense.
Apparently it's in the pub quiz book.
Oh, is it? Which pub? Oh, is it really? That's a made-up fact, isn't it? Who wrote the pub quiz book? Is that a Carry On fan thing? Was that a proper pub quiz book being published? I'll check. Look, you know me, folks. I've been researching the Carry Ons pretty much my entire working life. I've never seen that mentioned in any correspondence from Gerald Thomas or Peter Rogers or anybody about that. But I like it, so let's keep it going. Let's have that as a possible myth. But no, Hancock would have been great. But then again, laterally thinking, if Hancock's not available, who's Galton and Simpson's muse at the moment is Harry H. Corbett, who's having a break from Steptoe and Son, and he is sublime in it in his only Carry On. But oh God, can you imagine that? Tony Hancock opposite Deborah Kerr in Carry On Screaming. I'd pay top dollar to see that. Anyway.
Okay. Fiona says, do you remember the great Eric and Ernie comedy horror film? She can't remember the name.
Night Train to Murder, Fiona. Yes, of course I do. One of Eric's last jobs. I've forgotten that one. That is a brilliant. I love that film. That was part of the reason why they went back to ITV. They worked on ITV in the 60s, Two of a Kind and those sort of things, and then were lured over to the BBC for obviously their best television work. But then they were lured back to ITV, Thames particularly. Here they are now, Morecambe and Wise, and all that with the Thames logo. Purely because Houston Films, who did Minder, had promised them they would get some film work as well off the back of their change to ITV. They'd made 3 films in the 60s, one of which has a little horror element in it. Which one is it? That Riviera Touch has a sort of haunted house bit in it. But Night Train to Murder was Eric's last feature film. It never even made the cinema. The plan was it was going to go to the cinema. It was badly received, and it premiered, I think, just after Eric had died. So it might have been Christmas '84. It was on telly, I think, for the first time, which probably was when me and Fiona watched it for the first time. And I love it. I love Night Train to Murder. Little Sir Echo, how do you do? Hello, 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 and all that going on. And the cast, Roger Brier's in it, and Margaret Courtney. These are names to you and me, but these are great character actors. Fulton Mackay is in it as Mr. Mackay, the sort of solicitor. Lisa Anthony is beautiful in it. She was probably about 20 when she made that. She's in it. And Morecambe and Wise are basically, they're doing their own sort of Bob Hope haunted house film. They're sort of third-rate musical entertainers, which Eric always said they were, and they get an inheritance, or I think it's an inheritance. Anyway, they end up in this haunted house, and it's brilliant. It's and Joe McGrath directed it, who worked with Peter Sellers a lot and directed the Rising Damp film for Hammer. He directed it, so yeah, I love. So Night Train to Murder, Fiona. If you go onto eBay, you'll probably find a VHS of it for no money, probably. I've got a copy. Have you ever seen that one?
No.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
We'll
Another one.
Okay.
Right, we got a minute to go, so I'm going to give you one more question.
Okie dokie.
Okay, this is the last one.
I'm getting out of breath here. Gosh, go on. talking more than usual, even for me. Go on.
Gavin says, what's your favourite sitcom spin-off film that Hammer made in the 1970s?
That's a great question, because they didn't make enough horror films, comedy horror films, Hammer. Because they did a few, they did a couple of, well, I mean, they did all sorts of spin-offs. They did an Army Game spin-off. I think my favourite one is probably Man About the House, I think. Because Sally Thompson, who's a good mate of mine, loves horror films. And when she heard she was getting a Hammer film, she thought she would be playing a virgin in a Count Dracula film with Christopher Lee. And when she found out it was just a film version of Man About the House, she was quite upset. But she did a Hammer film, which is really, really important. And there's some great people in that. Norman Mitchell's in it, my old mate's in it, and Michael Ward and Melvin Hayes are a gay couple in it, they're very funny. And Spike Milligan's in it, right near the end of the sort of TV studio thing. It's a crazy film, but I think that's probably the best one. But there are not enough comedy horrors from Hammer. There's a couple. There's the Old Dark House, the 1960s with Vanilla Fielding, and That's Your Funeral, which I think, as far as now, but if I'm wrong about this, please let me know. But that was a really short-lived ITV sitcom. I think it was 6 episodes. That's Your Funeral, with Bill Fraser and David Batley, who did Rutland Weekend Television with Eric Idle. And they made a feature film out of this very short-run sitcom that Hammer did, and Dennis Price is in it. Now, I think all that's left in the vaults is the film version. I think the episodes have been wiped or mislaid or something, but I hope I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's true. But the film version, I've got a soft spot for that too, That's Your Funeral, which again, when I was working for ITV, working on the Hammer House of Horror TV series, I was desperate. I was begging for them to release that on DVD. I think it's come out from somewhere now, maybe Network could put it out, but it's worth. If you haven't seen That's Your Funeral, the Hammer film, that's a good one too.
So there we go. Right, we're at the end.
Oh well, I really enjoyed that one. We could do it again. It doesn't have to be Hammer. It doesn't have to be Halloween rather. We could be any time. But again, Gemma, thank you so much. That's been lovely as always. And
stay tuned. We've got some more things we're gonna pop up this week.
Yes.
I think
you talk like a total author script. It's how can I work with you? It's outrageous. No, we've got some exciting things coming up, haven't we?
We have.
From now until the new year kicks in. And what a year it's been. What a crappy year it's been. So remember, comedy is the answer. But as Gemma said earlier, please subscribe to the newsletter. Follow us on hashtag Comedy Historian. You'll find us on the Facebook. You're here right now, so you know where that is. If you hashtag Comedy Historian over on Twitter, you'll find my page, and also on Instagram, Comedy Historian, all one word. You'll find me on there as well. We do a daily comedy every day, and at the moment, leading up to Halloween, we're doing a Halloween comedy countdown. And today, as we started, was Charles Hawtrey, who sadly died this day in 1988. Brilliant comedy actor who did lots of comedy horror. Particularly Carry On Screaming, so there we go. And if you haven't got your copy of Jeepers Creepers yet, please go to spitefulpuppet.com. I think it's .com or .co.uk. Barnaby's here. Barnaby can produced
the
and
link
directed.
in.
Yes, please put the link in. And that's again, it's on my Twitter feed. I've pinned this event, but I will tonight after we do this, I will pin on Twitter the Jeepers Creepers thing. And of course, we've not mentioned Young Frankenstein, but that's mentioned a lot in that play because it's Marty Feldman's, for me, best film appearance as Igor. I ain't got nobody. Any excuse to sing. That's in there. We actually started the West End production started with spotlights on the heads. And the Museum of Comedy, when that opens, I think March next year, when it opens, the heads we had in the West End production are in the museum. And yes, but anyway, so buy the CD and also buy the book, which is very different from the play,
which is available here on on the Facebook page and through our newsletter, which you can subscribe to at www.robertross.co.uk. And Barnaby's, bless you, he's just put the link there.
Bless you.
He's got some other great stuff as well, so do go check out
the
his site.
Sherwood stuff is well worth tucking into, and yeah, we got some great guest stars in Jeepers Creepers. I'm sure you've seen, but yeah, it's Michael Palin and Jim Dale and Nigel Planer and Valerie Leon and Britt Eklund and all sorts, haven't we? It's pretty special. So buy your copy while they're hot.
And now it's time to say goodbye.
Say goodbye. I'm going to get a glass of wine because unlike Bela Lugosi's Dracula, I do drink wine, and we shall see you next time, maybe for Christmas.
Goodbye.
Bye bye now. Bye bye. Take good care.